Part 47. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 462. Chapter 460 of the main text volume of Ruyi Little Man, not as good as you. After hearing Tang Zhao's explanation, Ling Feng looked shocked and asked uncertainly, Xiao Ju wants to fake the game, is it true? In the match between Zhao Wei and Yu Yanqiwei, he also spent money. And because he lost 1,000 taels in a bet with Xiao Ju last time, he was punished by kneeling for half a night, and even his monthly routine was restricted. The situation was much better than the current Tang Zhao, at least he doesn't have to pay on credit when he goes to a brothel. Tang Zayadao, I heard with my own ears what he and Tang Ning discussed, could it be false? Ling Feng still didn't believe it and asked, but the Night Riders are his soldiers, so he has no reason to want them to lose. Tang Zhao thought for a while and asked, what if he bet a lot of money on Yu Yanqiwei? This. Ling Feng looked at Tang Zhao, his lips moved but he didn't say anything. It was undeniable that he felt that what Tang Zhao said this time made sense. The performance of the Zhao Wei in this competition was indeed eye-catching, but no one felt that under fair competition, they could defeat the left and right feather guards and the left and right golden feather guards, so this time in the competition with the right Yinkai guards, even if they can win, they will definitely lose the next game. As a result, their odds in the next game must be very low. If they want to make money through the competition, they can only find a way in this game. The major casinos in Beijing are full of people who lose when they bet on the Valiant Cavalry Guard. Even if they bet correctly, they won't make much money. And many general disciples like Ling Feng know through their elders in the family that the Valiant Cavalry Guard is stronger than Yin Qi Wei, so most of them will buy Zhao Wei Sheng. Xiao Ju's money from cheating at this time is the money of these people. Too insidious, Ling Feng slapped the table. After thinking about it, he said suspiciously, what if the news is wrong? Tang Zhao looked at him and said, wouldn't it be better to ask the crown prince? The longer Tang Ning got to know Xiao Ju, the more she discovered that, apart from being hopelessly stupid emotionally, he also had extremely quick reactions in other aspects, and her cooperation with him was flawless. As soon as he took a sip of tea, Xiao Ju walked out of a palace and said, I bought it. We'll each have 1,000 taels, and the Zhao guards will lose. After he finished speaking, he looked at Tang Ning and said, but in this case, we are still losing money. Just because we fool Tang Er, don't we lose money ourselves? Tang Ning would not do anything that would harm others but not benefit herself. He waved to Xiao Ju and whispered a few words in his ear. Looking for Lu Ya, Xiao Ju was stunned, and then said, it is indeed a good idea to let her go to the custody on our behalf, but won't she know how much money I have? No, I don't think so, please leave it to Princess Anyang. Xiao Ju suddenly seemed to have an idea. In an instant, he thought of a loophole that even Tang Ning himself was not aware of. This move could help him save inexhaustible personal money. Not long after, someone began to walk towards a hall in front. Xiao Ju caught a glimpse of several exotic women in strange costumes. His eyes lit up and he said, let's go and have a look too. At this time, many people had gathered in the hall. 4 tall women wearing light gauze, exposing their navels and thighs, with high nose bridges and deep eye sockets, and extremely exotic amorous feelings, twisted their soft waists in the hall. Many people's breathing became heavy. Somewhere in the palace, Tang Zhao and Ling Feng walked up to the Crown Prince of Dian, bowed their hands to him, and said, Your Highness, Crown Prince. It's the second young master Tang and the third young master Ling. The Crown Prince of Dian moved his eyes away from the 4 women from the western regions, looked at them and asked, how about these women from the western regions, don't they have a different flavor? Han women are much more enthusiastic. Tang Zhao had no intention of looking at this now. He looked at the Crown Prince of Dian, thought for a moment, and said, we have something to ask the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince of Dian looked at him and asked doubtfully, oh, What's the matter? Tang Zhao looked at him and asked, I wonder who Xiaoju will win in the next competition between the left Xiao Cavalry Guard and the right Yinkai Guard in the 16 Guards competition. The Crown Prince of Dian looked at the two of them and said in surprise, why do you ask this? Tang Zhao smiled and said, just ask. The Crown Prince of Dian shook his head and said, Xiaoju specifically asked me to keep it a secret for him. I'm afraid it will be difficult for my Crown Prince to disclose this matter. Tang Zhao looked at him and said, the prince said so, we have already guessed it. Did Xiaoju bet on Zioqi Wei to lose? The Crown Prince of Dian's expression remained unchanged and he said, my Crown Prince didn't say anything. Based on the performance of the Prince of Dian, Ling Feng had already guessed it, but after all, it was related to his entire wealth and he did not dare to be careless. He looked at the Prince of Dian again and asked, does the prince still remember Lu Yat? When the Prince of Dian heard this, his face turned pale. How could he not remember Lu Yat, a witch? He grew up in the capital. He was ignorant at that time and had fights with many powerful children in the capital. Xiaoju was one of them. Once he defeated Xiaoju, but somehow he offended Lu Yat. He would beat him every time he was caught. During that time, in order to avoid Lu Yat, he didn't even dare to leave the house. Ling Feng looked at him and said, I heard that Lu Yat and Xiaoju are together. The Crown Prince of Dian glanced in Xiaoju's direction, thought for a moment, looked at Ling Feng, and said calmly, he did bet on Zioqi Wei to lose. Tang Zhao clenched his hands into fists and said angrily, this bastard is so insidious. The Prince of Dian looked at him and asked, what's going on? Tang Zhao said, Xiaoju actually lost on purpose. There is something fishy about this match. What? The Prince of Dian frowned. If Xiaoju secretly manipulated and deliberately lost the match, wouldn't he lose money if he set the odds too high? He glanced in Xiaoju's direction, then looked at Tang Zhao, frowning, not knowing whether he should believe him. Ling Feng walked aside and said, I have to call Li Lang and the others over. They also bet on the cavalry guard to win. Soon, several familiar generals were gathered together by Ling Feng. After hearing the truth from Ling Feng and Tang Zhao, everyone was shocked and angry. What? He bet on the cavalry guard to lose. This bastard, he actually wanted to cheat. I bet all my fortune on the cavalry guard. No, no, I'm going to ask the prince to change it back. At the end of the 16 guards competition, the strength of each guard was actually similar, with a 50-50 chance of winning or losing. There was a risk in betting on anyone. After finally finding a chance of winning, they naturally had to bet on it, but they met Xiaoju, a wicked guy. If it weren't for Tang Zhao's reminder, they would have lost miserably this time. Thank you, Brother Tang, for reminding me. Thank you, Brother Tang. Let's drink together some other day. Seeing everyone raise their hands to thank him, Tang Zhao clasped his fists and said with a smile, I just happened to hear it. At this moment, his mind flashed with his elder brother Tang Jing's instructions to him before he left, and he pulled the corners of his mouth. Not only did he not cause trouble, but he also exposed Xiaoju's conspiracy and made friends with these generals. After this competition, he wanted some people in the Tang family to see if he, Tang Zhao, was good for nothing except his good looks. On the other side, Tang Ning looked at Tang Zhao and others on the opposite side, then turned to ask Xiaoju, aren't you afraid of offending so many people at once? What am I afraid of? Xiaoju didn't care at all, and said, I don't worry about too many debts. I don't get along with them anyway. Even if I lose, they can't do anything to me. Those who think they have the inside information will probably bet a lot of money. When they lose too much, they may really fight with Xiaoju. Be careful. Tang Ning looked at him and said, when you go out at night, it's best to go with Lu Yat. Xiaoju didn't care about it and was full of confidence. Tang Ning was relieved and focused on watching the dance. Traditional dance has the beauty of traditional dance, with flying sleeves and every movement exuding elegance and dignity. Foreign dance also has its own characteristics, with grandeur and passion, and each has its own merits. Is it beautiful? Just when he was watching intently, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Honestly, they dance really well. Tang Ning turned around and looked at Sumei, saying, "They're not as good as you." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 463. Chapter 461 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man. After the envoy from the western regions returned from Chu, he experienced several overturning incidents, which greatly revealed Tang Ning's desire for survival and ability to react on the spot. In some cases, he can even tell lies without changing his face and opening his eyes. Of course, what I said just now is not a lie. Sumei is indeed more beautiful than those women from the western regions, in more ways than one. Really, Sumei looked at him and asked, "Have you ever seen me dance?" No. Tang Ning shook her head and said, "Why don't you go to Tianashanju and let me see you dance a bit?" "Let's wait another day." Sumei rolled her eyes at him, looked at the women from the western regions dancing in the hall, and asked, "Do you also think they are beautiful?" "Well enough." Tang Ning answered honestly. From his aesthetic point of view, these four women from the western regions are at least one of 100 beauties. Their appearance is online and in line with public aesthetics. In future generations, if they are packaged a little, they will be traffic florists. If he said it didn't look good, that would be too much against his will and his answer would be without sincerity. Sumei asked again, "Compared with me?" Tang Ning said without hesitation, "Of course you can't compare. Are you called the most beautiful woman in the capital for nothing? No matter who you compare with, you will always be beautiful. No matter who you compare with, you will always be beautiful. When you praise someone, you need to be skillful. When you praise a girl for her beauty, you cannot say that she is better than others. As the saying goes, to judge a person's character, you should look at his friends, and to judge a person's ability, you should look at his enemies. If you want to praise Sumei for her beauty, then the person you compare with her must be at least a beauty, which will highlight her beauty even more. For example, when people in the capital describe him, they will say, he is as talented as Zijian and as handsome as Pan, and they will never use Xiaoju as a comparison object. Sumei was very satisfied with his answer and asked, "Where are you and your wife?" Tang Ning said, "Except for a few of them." Sumei did not continue to embarrass him. She looked at him and asked, "Don't you never attend these banquets? Why are you here today?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "How do you know I never participate?" Sumei glanced at him and said, "We're all sleeping in the same bed. What else do you know that I don't know?" What she said was a bit intriguing. She slept on the same bed, but he had never done anything to her. Tang Ning thought about it carefully and felt that there was nothing to show off about it. "I didn't want to come at first, but then I felt bored, so I came here with Xiaoju," Tang Ning said casually, and then asked, "Why are you here?" "You saw it just now." Sumei glanced in the direction of the Prince of Dian and said, "I'm just a restaurant owner. How dare I not come when the prince invites me?" If another restaurant owner said this and Tang Ning still believed it, he would not look down on Sumei so much. She only needed to hook her fingers to make the dandy's present turn around. No prince could withstand her half-success. Force. Across the way, Ling Feng looked up and saw Tang Ning and Sumei standing very close to each other. He looked at Prince Dian and said unconsciously, "Tang Ning seems to be very familiar with Miss Su." The Crown Prince of Dian loves Sumei, and almost everyone in the capital knows this. However, even though he has a distinguished status, the most beautiful woman in the capital treats him no differently than others. The Crown Prince of Dian looked up and said calmly, "I heard that they are siblings, so it is normal for them to get to know each other a little bit." "Don't you know, the prince?" Ling Feng looked at him, shook his head and said, "Nowadays, the world is declining, and people's hearts are not as old as before. It's not just the brother who hums the sister. The Prince of Dian frowned and said, "What's going on?" Ling Feng smiled and changed the subject. Tang Ning and Xiaoju are using their power for personal gain, manipulating the game and making profits from it. Do you want the prince to watch helplessly? What else? Prince Dian glanced at him and said with a smile, "You don't know how much His Majesty protects the Xiao family. Even if he knew that he was really manipulating the game, he would probably turn a blind eye. As for Tang Ning, there is no one else in the court who is more respected by His Majesty than him, so we'd better not cause this trouble." Ling Feng's provocation method didn't work, so he walked away asking for trouble. The Crown Prince of Dian glanced at his leaving figure, curled his lips in disdain, and then looked at the two people opposite who were whispering again. Although Ling Feng's provoking method was clumsy, it was undeniable that what he said was indeed the truth. He has been pursuing Su Mei for many years and has never even had a chance to get close to her. This Mr. Tang, who came from behind, has only been in Beijing for 2 years, but he has done something that no man in the capital can do. It is really disappointing. He waved, and a man who looked like a butler came over and asked respectfully, "What are your orders, Your Highness?" The Prince of Dian looked at him and lowered his voice, "Tomorrow I will ask someone to go to the Yashitai. The 16th Guards competition is hosted by the Ministry of War, and the Yashitai has the power to supervise. If the Ministry of War makes any mistakes, the Yashitai can exercise the responsibility of impeachment." After the wild and exciting dance of several beauties from the western region, there were some regular programs. Su Mei was like the most coquettish and fragrant flower. No matter where she stood, she would attract a swarm of bees and butterflies. Tang Ning was soon attracted by it. The people who came to chat with him squeezed away. When he walked out of the temple and was about to get some air, he bumped into someone who was facing him. A Western woman was holding a wine glass in her hand, and almost spilled it on him. After the woman stood still, she immediately said, "To Buletin Chi." "It's okay." Tang Ning waved his hand to indicate that it was okay. Listening to the Western woman speaking a strange Chinese language, at this moment, Tang Ning's heart actually rose with the urge to eat mutton skewers. When the Western envoys came to the capital, there were many caravans accompanying them. Tang Ning accompanied Zaira shopping a few days ago and found cumin that had never been seen in Chen State. He immediately bought all of it, but he didn't have time to use it. A man walked out from behind her, looked at Tang Ning, and said, "I actually did not mean to offend you, please forgive me." Tang Ning looked at the wet hem of his clothes and waved his hand, "It's okay, just spilled some wine, it's not a big deal." The man put one hand on his chest and bowed to Tang Ning. He said, "The envoy of Zioan State, on behalf of Iaguli, apologizes to the young master." Tang Ning looked at him and said in surprise, "Are you an envoy from the western regions?" For this competition, Chen State also invited many envoys from small countries in the western regions. Although Tang Ning had never seen them, he could guess that the envoys from small countries in the western regions would not have yellow skin, black hair and black eyes, speak fluent Beijing Mandarin without any accent, and not have that unique mutton kebab taste. If he didn't say it, Tang Ning would definitely think he was a Han Chinese. The man saw his doubts and said, "The young master may have misunderstood. I am originally a Han Chinese." Tang Ning was a little surprised that a Han Chinese could become an envoy of a small country in the western regions, but it was just a surprise. He waved his hand and said, "Okay, I have apologized for my crime. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first." The man immediately stepped back and said, "Please, young master." Until Tang Ning left, the man and the woman named Iaguli were still standing there, looking at the direction he left, with respect in their eyes. Xiaoju stood in the courtyard, looked at Tang Ning, and asked in surprise, "What did you say to that beauty from the western regions?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "Nothing, she bumped into me, and the envoy of the so-called Zioan kingdom apologized for her crime, and I left. Xiaoju was surprised and said, "You also understand the Western region's language?" Tang Ning glanced at him. This is the disadvantage of being uneducated. The concept of the Western region's language itself is wrong. The scope of the Western regions is very large, and the many small countries in it almost all have their own languages and writings, which is very different from the Chen and Chu countries that were once unified and had little difference in official language. In addition to Chinese, he also knows a little Sushan language, which is limited to the few sentences taught by Wan Yan Yan. He knows nothing about the languages of those small countries in the Western regions. He speaks Chinese. Tang Ning looked at Xiaoju and said, "Go back if there is nothing else. I will treat you to grilled lamb skewers today." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 464. Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Text Volume Chapter 462 Public Enemy Cumin, also known as dry tea and fennel, has the title of the king of condiments. Using it to cook beef and mutton can remove the fishy smell and make the meat more delicious. Tang Ning has long missed the familiar smell of barbecue. Unfortunately, this kind of thing is mainly distributed in Central Asia and is not available in Chen and Chu. Businessmen in the Western region sell it as spices. Tang Ning told them that the next time they come to Beijing, you can bring more, and he will charge you as much as you bring. It turns out those beauties from the Western regions are from the Zioan kingdom. Xiaoju took a big mouthful of skewers and said without wiping the marks on the corners of his mouth, "I have long heard that Zioan is rich in beauties. I guess they must be the original people of Zioan. Women in other places may not be so beautiful." The old beggar and old Zheng were drinking and making skewers, praising the taste of cumin. With the speed of the three of them, Tang Ning was a little overwhelmed. Tang Ning focused on the barbecue and asked casually, "What aboriginal people?" "Don't you know?" Xiaoju looked at him and explained, "Zioan was originally a small country in the western regions with only a few thousand people. And because Zioan is rich in beauties, it was often plundered by other countries. Since more than 10 years ago, at the beginning, Zioan slowly rose up and gradually annexed the surrounding small countries. Now it has more than 100,000 troops and is one of the largest countries in the western region. The original people of Zioan refer to the original citizens of Zioan." Tang Ning only knew that the western region was very large. The real territory was larger than either of the two countries Chen and Chu. However, the western region was not a unified country like these two countries. There were 30 to 50 countries in the western region, large and small, with large populations. 100,000, maybe only a few thousand or even a few hundred, but he didn't know the specific country. The people of the Chen state knew little about the western regions. This was because the western regions posed no threat to the Chen state. Those small countries were independent and had trade relations with the Chen state. They were not as brutal and violent as the Sushan people on the grasslands. Young man Xiao is right. The old beggar took a sip of his wine and said after thinking, "Zioan's beauty is beautiful, with a high nose and big eyes, but her skin is too rough, and she is not as good as a Han woman." Shuiling. Xiaoju and the old beggar couldn't stop discussing beauties. Tang Ning roasted the meat and sent it to the women in the room. Because he and Xiaoju had something to ask Princess Anyang, she was specially invited here tonight. Halfway through the meal, Xiaoju mysteriously pulled Princess Anyang aside and whispered a few words to her. "Prince Dion." Princess Anyang looked at him and said in surprise, "Why don't you buy it yourself?" Xiaoju waved his hand and said, "Don't ask. In a word, will you help me with this or not?" Princess Anyang looked at him and asked, "Did Prince Dion provoke you?" "The person who provoked me is not the Prince of Dion, but I think he is quite distasteful. Xiaoju said, you help me place the bet, and you will be one of us afterward, how about it? Princess Anyang thought for a moment and said, I'm 2 and you're 8. Xiaoju nodded without hesitation, deal. After the group stage, the 8 teams that advanced took a few days of rest and started the next round of competition today. In this round of 4 games, 1 guard will be eliminated in each game. The first game is the competition between the left Zhaoqi guard and the right Yinkai guard. According to the odds offered by Jingzhou Casino, everyone generally believed that the Zhaoqi guards were extremely likely to lose. They fought hard to defeat the Zhou Yinkai guards. They would stop when facing the superior Yu Yinkai guards. The later the game, the more spectators there are on the sidelines. The dignitaries in the capital and the children of major families also frequently appear on the court. His Royal Highness. The appearance of the Prince of Dian made the young people in the VIP seats stand up one after another. The Crown Prince of Dian said politely and sat at the front. The view here is wide, the location is very close to the high platform in the middle, and the tickets are correspondingly higher, but to the Prince of Dian and the surrounding dignitaries or officials, it is nothing. Ling Feng and Tang Zhao sat on the side of Prince Dian, turned to look at him, and asked, Your Highness is also interested in this competition. Prince Dian said, let me see if what you said that day is true. If someone really manipulates the game secretly, Yashitai will not sit idly by and watch. The Prince of Dian looked forward. The reason why he came here was actually because the outcome of this competition was closely related to him. In the major casinos in the capital, the bookmaker can calculate the odds to become invincible, and then make profits by pumping money. As the heir apparent, it is naturally impossible for him to do these things. He only needs to simply control the odds to get rid of it. Obtaining huge benefits, of course, is actually a kind of bet. If the bet wins, it will be good. If the bet loses, he will also suffer huge losses. He glanced at Tang Zhao one last time and asked, Are you sure Xiaoju will deliberately let Zhaoqi Wei lose? Everyone around Tang Zhao also looked at him, because this was directly related to their net worth. Tang Zhao said solemnly, What I heard with my own ears, can it be wrong? After the gong sounded, the competition officially began. Those who can break out of the group stage are the best in each group. A strong showdown is naturally much more exciting than a one-sided crushing. In the surrounding auditorium, there were many generals from various guards and officials from the DPRK and the central government, looking at the field and talking a lot. Is this still the Zhou Xiaoyi we know? What exactly have they gone through, and how can they make such a big improvement in such a short period of time? I heard that these cavalry guards were trained by Dr. Tang from the Ministry of War. His Majesty even promised that if the left cavalry guard could win the first place among the 16 guards, he would be appointed as the Lieutenant General of the left cavalry guard. Even if he won this game, he would be appointed as the Lieutenant General. Isn't this partiality from the Ministry of War? Well, it's just training, and it doesn't violate the rules. If other guards can ask him to do it, it's fine. What I wonder is, how can he, a champion, know how to train soldiers? The cavalry guards are notoriously weak, but their performance on the field in recent days has refreshed everyone's perception of them. There are many envoys from small countries in the western regions on the sidelines, looking at the competition on the field, all with surprised eyes. However, this wonderful duel, in the eyes of some people, is not the case. Ling Feng looked at the Zhou Xiaoyi who was fighting with the Yu Yinkai guard and was not at all inferior, and looked at Tang Zhao, surprised, didn't you say that the Zhaoqi guard would admit defeat? Tang Zhao looked at the field, his heart was already panicking, but he still forced himself to be calm, and said, it would be too obvious to admit defeat directly, we should act it out first. After a cup of tea, the Prince of Dian looked at the Zhou Xiaoyi who had already attacked the Yu Yinkai guard and asked, is this also acting? Tang Zhao's face turned pale, but at this moment, he felt a gaze cast on him. He turned his head and saw Xiaoju standing not far away, looking at him with a smile. This look contained too many meanings. Tang Zhao finally realized something, and he shuddered and stood up suddenly. Ling Feng looked at him and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Tang Zhao looked at Ling Feng, and then at the people who, under his instigation, bet their entire fortunes on the Zioki guard to lose, and his face turned even paler. "You guys wait, I'm going to the toilet." He looked at everyone in fear, left a word, and hurried away. "Didn't he just go there?" Ling Feng said in surprise, and was suddenly startled by a man who stood up next to him. "What's wrong?" Ling Feng looked at him, and just as he opened his mouth, 3 gongs sounded in his ears. He looked at the field, and Wu Langzhong of the Ministry of War was shouting to announce that Zhou Xiaoyi had won. Ling Feng's body trembled, his face full of disbelief. Beside him, the Prince of Dian was pale, and the others also looked unbelieving. They had all bet on Zioki Wei to win before, but under Tang Zhao's instigation, they changed their minds and added silver. They thought they would make a big profit at once, but now they have lost everything. Tang Zhao. Everyone trembled, gnashed their teeth, and spoke with resentment. Outside the field, Tang Zhao, who had hurriedly left the field, paused, trembled, and ran towards the outside of the Zioki camp the next moment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 465. Chapter 463 of the text volume of Ruyi Little Man. The competition between Zhou Xiaoyi and Yu Yinkawei has ended, and many people in the venue still can't believe it. The cavalry guard has always been at the bottom among the 16 guards. In this competition, they have overcome many obstacles and eliminated many powerful enemies. So far, they have occupied one of the top 4 seats in advance. Before the competition, many people firmly believed that Zhou Xiaoyi's footsteps would end here, and now they were paying the price for their contempt. In the crowd, a certain censor from the censorship station shook his head. Before the game, the censorship station received an anonymous report letter, saying that Tang Ning, a doctor in the Ministry of War, and Xiaoju, the cavalry school captain Zhou Xiao, were manipulating the game and profiting from it, and would deliberately let Zhou Xiao Wei lost the competition, and now Zhou Xiao and Wei won. The rumor was naturally broken without attack. Somewhere in the stands, someone clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. "Where's Tang Zhao?" Ling Feng's face was also gloomy and he whispered, "Go to the latrine." The man said angrily, "Even if he jumps into the pit, we will find him." If it weren't for Tang Zhao, they would have won this game long ago, instead of losing all the money like now. "Hey, what happened to you? Did you lose money?" Xiaoju wandered over from the side, looked at them, shook his head and said, "You should believe in our night cavalry." Ling Feng looked at him and sneered, "Didn't you buy the night rider yourself? I should also believe them." Xiaoju sighed, looked at them, and said, "I was a little sad when I lost the money, but when I saw you, I felt much better." "You." They already had deep grudges. Xiaoju's words almost made everyone angry. Ling Feng even stepped forward, clenching his fists as if he wanted to take action immediately. Xiaoju was not afraid at all and asked, "What, do you want to do something?" Ling Feng looked at the night cavalry guard not far away, loosened his fist, and said, "This is the night cavalry camp. It's not good to do anything here. If you have the guts, I'll see you at the old place on Fenglin Road today at 12:00. Xiaoju said disdainfully, "I'll see you in the same place, I'm afraid of you." Ling Feng said, "Whoever doesn't come is the grandson." "Who did Sun Tzu say?" "My grandson said you." Ling Feng panted heavily, looking at Xiaoju's leaving back, and forcibly suppressed the urge to take action. If he hadn't been concerned that this was the Zioki camp and Xiaoju's territory, he would have rushed up and fought with him for 300 rounds. He looked back at everyone and asked, Xiao is so arrogant, will you go to the old place on Fenglin Road tonight? Fenglin Road is an old road in Beijing. There are few pedestrians on weekdays. They, the general disciples, often had fights there when they were young. When mentioning the old place of Fenglin Road, everyone knows where it is. Why don't you go? I've long been unhappy with Xiaoju. If it hadn't been for him this time, we wouldn't have lost. To be honest, I really want to beat him too. If this wasn't the Zioki camp, I would have taken action just now. As soon as Ling Feng finished speaking, everyone responded one after another. This was the usual way for general disciples to solve problems. Without any guards, they used their own fists to solve problems. It was simple, rough, and direct. They used to fight like this with Xiaoju, Lu Jun, and others. After setting the number of people to fight today, someone said, right now, I want to beat up another person more than Xiaoju. I'm afraid Tang Zhao has run away. One person looked in the direction outside the camp and said suspiciously, do you think Tang Zhao might have colluded with Xiaoju a long time ago? Probably not. Another person shook his head and said, he and Xiaoju have never dealt with each other, and he himself also lost money. Could this be Xiaoju's plan? You mean, Xiaoju deliberately bet against the cavalry guard and then deliberately revealed false news to Tang Zhao, and then asked Tang Zhao to reveal it to us? Does Xiaoju have such a brain? Whether Tang Zhao did it intentionally or not, he caused us such misery this time. Let's go to the Tang mansion together soon. After some discussion, everyone quickly united their front and marched towards the Tang family. Tang family. Tang Zhao hurried home, his face turned pale, and he packed his luggage with trembling hands. Tang Jing walked in from outside, looked at him, and asked in surprise, where are you going? Tang Zhao carried a baggage on his back and said, do you have any banknotes? Give them all to me. I'll go to my uncle's house for a while. You are going to Jiangnan? Tang Jing was shocked when he heard this. He quickly stepped forward and asked, what trouble did you cause outside again? It's too late to explain, give it to me quickly. Tang Zhao took out a stack of banknotes from his sleeve, put it away, and strode out the door. As he walked, he said, if anyone is looking for me, just tell me said I didn't come back. His heart was beating wildly at this moment, and he quietly slipped out through the back door of Tang Mansion. This time, so many people have lost their money, and the Prince of Dian is probably the biggest loser. That is a figure that makes him weak just thinking about it. If he stays in the capital, he is afraid that he will be torn into pieces by these people. Nor can it be stable. The only solution for now is to go outside to avoid the limelight. At this moment, he felt like crying, and scolded Xiaoju and Tang Ning. Experience showed that he was fooled by them again this time. He wanted to ask them in front of them, why did they have trouble with him every time? Obviously, he has no chance to ask. This time, half of the generals in the capital have been offended. He will go to Jiangnan to avoid the limelight for at least a year. On the way back, Tang Ning and Xiaoju also thought carefully about why they would choose Tang Ersi every time. The conclusion is that he is the best to deceive, and he will take the bait with just a little temptation. There is obviously a stupid fish, so there is no reason for them to choose a shrewd one. When passing by the gate of Tang's house, I saw a group of people blocking the door of Tang's house and shouting curses. The gate of Tang's house was closed tightly. Two unethical people actually took off their pants and peed in front of the gate of Tang's house in public. This time the disciples of the generals are really lawless in the capital. He lowered the car curtain, looked at Xiaoju, and asked, are you really going tonight? Xiaoju said, how can we go back on something we have agreed upon? Then you can call a few more people. If you call Lu Ya, you don't have to worry. Xiaoju shook his head disdainfully and said, how can a woman help with a man's affairs? Don't worry, I am enough to deal with them alone. Tang Ning originally thought that Xiaoju would call Lu Jun and the others, but he didn't expect that he had no such plan. In this way, he was probably very sure about tonight's battle. Although Xiaoju was a bit stupid at times, he was definitely not stupid. Tang Ning didn't ask any questions and there was no need to worry. For him, there was another thing to worry about. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "What if Lu Ya finds out about the fact that you asked Princess Anyang to place bets on your behalf?" "She will definitely know." Xiaoju waved his hand and said, "Even if you believe there are ghosts in the world, don't believe a woman's mouth. I'm sure she already knows it now." Tang Ning asked in surprise, "Aren't you afraid?" A mysterious smile appeared on Xiaoju's face and he said, "That little money is nothing. Most of my money is pledged outside. They say that falling in love makes people stupid, but Xiaoju has clearly become a spirit." He and Xiaoju returned to the Tang family and found that Lu Ya and Princess Anyang were there. Lu Ya looked at him and asked, "Did the Knight Rider win?" Xiaoju nodded and said, "We won." Lu Ya pulled him aside, frowned and asked, "Would you rather let Princess Anyang help you than find me?" Shh. Xiaoju glanced in the direction of Princess Anyang, made a silent gesture to her, and said, "If you don't do this well, you will offend others. How can I let you go with confidence?" Lu Ya's eyes softened when she looked at him, and she also looked at Princess Anyang and said, "Then you don't have to give her that much, a full 20%. Xiaoju waved his hand and said, "The money is not important. I just can't stand the Prince of Dian and asking him to lose more money. I originally planned to give her 90%. You still want to give her 90%, is your money brought by the strong wind?" Lu Ya tapped Xiaoju's forehead hard, and said, "I can't stand the Prince of Dian, he bullied you when he was a child. Coming. Let's do it this way. From now on, you will be responsible for taking care of my money." Xiaoju looked at her and said, "Then 80% let her give it to you directly. If I need money, I can just ask you for it." Lu Ya was a little embarrassed and said, "How can this be done? We haven't gotten married yet." "It will happen sooner or later." Xiaoju looked at her and said seriously, "Just promise me." Lu Ya hesitated for a while, then nodded and said, "That's good. Without money, it also saves you from having sex outside. You can even go to a brothel and call 10 girls. If you still have, I can't spare you next time." "Don't worry." Xiaoju spread his hands and said, "I don't have any money anymore, how can I go there?" Lu Ya glanced at him and said, "Who knows if you have hidden money elsewhere?" Xiaoju looked at her helplessly and asked, "Am I that kind of person?" "It's for you." Tang Yaoyao came over from a distance, handed a stack of banknotes to Xiaoju, and said, "This is what you asked me to place a bet for you. After winning, it will add up to 100,000 taels. You counting?" Tang Ning was playing Ludo with Xiao Xiao when she heard a strange noise coming from the yard. She glanced back, turned around and covered her little eyes, and said, "Be good, don't look." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 466. The 464th chapter of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun. Helper Tang Yaoyao stood beside Tang Ning, watching Xiaoju being unilaterally ravaged by Lu Ya, and said in surprise, "Winning money and still getting beaten, what's wrong with them?" Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What did you give Xiaoju just now?" "Nothing." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and said, "He asked me to bet 20,000 taels of silver for him, and I just gave him the money he won." "It's okay." Tang Ning glanced in Xiaoju's direction and said, "Anyway, it's not the first time they have done this. Lu Ya knows the limit." Xiaoju also said last time that he likes Lu Ya to beat him. A quarter of an hour later, Xiaoju sat on the chair with half of his buttocks, his eyes were dull, and he said with extreme regret, "I am so stupid, really. I just know that Princess Anyang can't believe it, and I don't know that Miss Tang can't believe it either. In the future, Xiaoju will know that daily accidents are actually nothing unusual. Lu Ya is still just a junior girlfriend. When she stays with Xiao Yi for a long time and learns a little bit of his mother-in-law's power from her, Xiaoju will understand what kind of terrifying creature a girlfriend is. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Will this affect the fight tonight?" Xiaoju pointed at his head and said, "Fighting does not necessarily rely on the body, but mainly relies on the brain." Tang Ning shook his head. If Xiaoju had a brain, he would not let Tang Yaoyao help him place the bet. "Fight, what fight?" Lu Ya's voice came from behind. Tang Ning stood up and left time for them. He still had to discuss with Tang Yaoyao about how to proceed with the next few competitions. In today's competition, Zhou Xiaoyi has successfully advanced to the semi-finals. There are 3 more games to come, which will be completed within 3 days. These 3 games are Yu Yue vs Zhou Ximenwei, Zhou Jinyue vs Yu Baimenwei, and Zhou Yue vs Yu Jinyue. There is nothing to bet on in these 3 games. The strength of the 2 teams in the first 2 games is very different, and it is almost impossible to reverse. The odds are pitifully low. In the last game, the 2 teams are evenly matched. If you bet, the risk is too great. Gambling is not a good habit, so Tang Ning never participates in gambling games that he is not sure of. The game of Zioki Wei has made them a lot of money, enough to hold many big competitions, and there is no need to bet on the remaining 3 games. The gains from this game are naturally more than just silver. If Emperor Chen keeps his word, then he is now the general of Zhuoxiaowei. If he wins 2 more games, the 5,000 people of Zhuoxiaowei will all be under his control as the general of Zhonglang, including Xiaoju, who is just his subordinate. Some people are happy and some are sad. The gate of the Tang family has been embarrassed by many generals' children until a servant of the Tang family went out from the side door and attracted the Jinyue, and everyone scattered like birds and beasts. Tang Jing sent people to wash the front of the Tang mansion with water, and the stench in the air dissipated a little. These people urinated at the gate of the Tang mansion, which was a direct bully. But the Tang family had no way to deal with this. If it was just 1 or 2 families, it would be fine. They could report them and make those playboys pay for it. But the problem was that there were 7 or 8 well-known generals in the capital, and the court could not punish them all. The Tang family had to bear this loss. What made him most frustrated was that until now, he didn't know what Tang Zhao had done outside, and how he had offended so many generals at once. Fortunately, he ran fast. If his second uncle knew that he had made the Tang family at odds with so many generals, he would probably break his legs today. Thinking of the promise he made to himself that he would never cause trouble, Tang Jing was filled with regret. In the Dian King's mansion, the Dian King looked at the people in front of him and calculated, his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The competition of the cavalry guards made him lose almost half of his wealth, and all his years of accumulation and efforts were destroyed. Tang Zhao, Xiaoju. Thinking of Tang Zhao's so-called inside story, he was so angry that his teeth itched. Without the victory of the cavalry guards, he would not have lost so much money, and he also hated Xiaoju. The capital, Fenglin Road. Fenglin Road is located in a remote area. It has been half abandoned for more than 10 years. Now almost no one knows it. But for the sons of generals, this road is not unfamiliar. Because since childhood, this is the place where they have made appointments to fight each other, either one-on-one or many-on-many. This place is remote and no one will find it, let alone be seen by the elders at home. Before the time of Su, more than 10 figures gathered here. A person standing next to Ling Feng said, "Where is Xiaoju? Why hasn't he come yet? He won't come, will he?" "It's just right that he doesn't come," Ling Feng sneered and said, "if he doesn't come, tomorrow the whole capital will know that he, Xiaoju, is a cowardly son of a turtle and a bastard." For the generals, whether they can win the fight is another matter, but whether they dare to fight is a matter of dignity. Running away from the battlefield is much more shameful than being beaten up. "Who do you think Xiaoju will ask to come, Lu Jun, Mu Yu, or Lu Teng. Lu Teng and Xiaoju are not in the same group, why would he come? Have you forgotten that Xiaoju is now with Lu Ya, so Lu Teng is in the same group with him? We have more than a dozen people, are we afraid of him, Lu Teng? What about Lu Ya? When everyone was talking, they all shut up when they talked about a certain topic. Lu Teng is not scary, Lu Ya is scary. Many children of the generals have experienced how powerful that woman is. If it weren't for Xiaoju's cavalry guards who made them lose money, Xiaoju would be too arrogant. In fact, they are quite grateful that he accepted Lu Ya, the monster. One person glanced forward and suddenly said, "Someone is coming." A carriage was seen slowly coming from the front. When it got closer, someone saw the sign on the carriage and said, "It's the carriage of the Xiao mansion. Xiaoju is coming." Looking at the carriage slowly approaching, Ling Feng showed a trace of doubt on his face and murmured, "What the hell is going on?" He came alone. In order to prevent Xiaoju from calling for help, he specially found a few more people after returning. Some of them were quite skilled. Unless Xiaoju could call twice as many people as them, they would only be beaten. Xiaoju didn't have many friends in the capital, and Ling Feng didn't believe that the carriage could accommodate 30 people. Although Xiaoju is stupid, he would not come to die alone. For some reason, when Ling Feng saw this lonely carriage, he felt a little uneasy. The curtain was lifted, Xiaoju got off the carriage, looked at the opposite side, and said in surprise, "It's a big scene." He looked at Ling Feng and asked, "You brought so many people to fight, does your father know?" If his father knew that he was causing trouble outside, he would be beaten, but he naturally couldn't show his cowardice in front of so many people. Ling Feng looked at him and said, "You don't care whether my father knows or not, Xiao, if you have any helpers, call them out quickly, don't think we will show mercy to you later." Ling Feng's meaning was very clear. If Xiaoju really didn't have any helpers, then they would beat him up in a while. Xiaoju lifted the curtain of the carriage and asked, "General Ling, did you hear everything?" As he finished speaking, a middle-aged man with a gloomy face jumped off the carriage. Looking at the middle-aged man, Ling Feng's body trembled, and he stood there in a daze, saying in a lost voice, "Dad." Warm Ti. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 467. In the second round of the 16 guards competition, the 8-4 competition, Tang Ning had just arrived at the cavalry camp when he heard about the fight between Xiaoju and Ling Feng and others yesterday. It is said that Ling Feng invited more than 10 familiar generals yesterday, some of whom were known for their skills. However, although their formation was strong, they were defeated and fled in the end. Xiaoju only invited one person, who was Ling Feng's father. According to insiders, when General Ling beat Ling Feng yesterday, the others first retreated dozens of steps, and after seeing the scene of General Ling beating Ling Feng, they fled in all directions. In this fight, Xiaoju easily won. No one knows what happened afterwards. It is only said that Ling Feng was locked up for a month and will probably be released after the new year. When Tang Ning heard the news, he almost didn't react. It was not until this moment that he understood that what Xiaoju said about outsmarting was actually to call the parents in a fight. With his generation, the current backbone generation of the generals, except Lu Ding, all had to give him face. However, this method is effective, but it is a bit too shameless. I don't know who he learned it from. He can do such a thing as calling the parents in a fight. He is also unique among the children of the generals. As the saying goes, those who are close to vermilion will be red, and those who are close to ink will be black. However, Tang Ning also believes that those who come out of the mud will not be stained. Although Xiaoju is shameless, as his friend, he will definitely not be influenced by him. There was nothing unexpected in the next three competitions. In the first two games, the right feather guard and the left golden feather guard easily defeated their opponents. The only interesting one was the competition between the right golden feather guard and the left feather guard. According to the rules set by the Ministry of War, in the competition, we will try our best to avoid the situation where strong teams meet each other. However, the Zoya Wei ranked second in points in Group A, and strictly speaking, it was a weak team. It was natural for it to face the first team of Group D, the right Jinya Wei. The result of this competition was that the Zoya Wei defeated the right Jinya Wei and won this crucial victory. Since then, the top 4 of the 16 guards have been announced. Both the left and right Yulan Wei persisted to the end. Among the left and right Jinya Wei, the right Jinya Wei was eliminated and replaced by the left Zhaoqi Wei. In the next semi-finals, the opponent of the Zhou Xiao Ei was the right Yulan Wei. Only one team could be left between the left Jinya Wei and the left Yulan Wei. According to inertial thinking, the Zhou Xiao Ei would naturally not be the opponent of the right Yi Wei, but along the way, they have created too many miracles, and no one dares to guarantee whether there will be a next time. Even the powerful right feather guards, after the last round of competition, immediately conducted a 3-day closed special training, obviously considering Zhou Xiao Ei as a real opponent. Zhou Xiao Ei was also determined to win the next game. The 100 contestants were led by a captain to the mountains for special training. This was their chance to turn things around and also a chance to wash away the shame of being ranked last among the 16 guards. It was already the middle of the 12th lunar month, and the New Year atmosphere had begun to take off outside. Xiru and Xiao Ai had also begun to prepare for the New Year. Tang Ning had been busy with the 16 guards competition, and had no feelings about the New Year for the time being. The women at home had all gone out, and he sat in the pavilion in the yard, feeling a little bored. He always felt that something seemed to be missing around him after returning to Beijing this time. Thinking carefully, he realized that something was really missing. Those who used to like to cause trouble for him seemed to have become quiet. Do you think those people in the Tang family are fools? Xiao Ju sat opposite him, glanced at him, and said, "They are against you, and every time they are made to look humiliated and embarrassed, they are always unlucky. Unless they are really fools, they will trouble you again and again." Xiao Ju paused, and then said, "What's more, you are now a big celebrity in the eyes of His Majesty. Not to mention the 6 ministries, first you were sent to the state of Chu, and now you are asked to organize the 16 guards competition. Even a pig can see that His Majesty is intentionally cultivating you. They will not easily provoke you." What Xiao Ju said actually makes some sense. When he first arrived in the capital, he would encounter troubles when he went out to eat. As he spent more time in the capital and his official position was promoted again and again, these small troubles gradually became less. However, this does not rule out that some people are accumulating strength and want to take advantage of him one day when he is not paying attention, and then hold back a big move to hit him by surprise. The best defense is actually offense. However, it is extremely difficult to overthrow a deep-rooted family. Unless the Tang family really makes Chen Huang intolerable, he will not watch him do that. Tang Ning originally had a breakthrough, but now even Tang Zhao, the fool, has run away. For a while, he has no good solution. Tang family. At the dinner, the atmosphere was as dull as ever. This was partly due to the Tang family's family education, but more because Tang Zhao offended a small half of the generals in Beijing, which made the Tang family quite embarrassed in this matter. Even if they were surrounded by people and made trouble at the door, they could only swallow this breath. The generals have always been the ones that the Tang family and Prince Duan want to befriend. Although they dare not let them surrender, it is also beneficial to establish some superficial connections. Behind Prince Kong stood many powerful people, and his relationship with some military families was naturally better than Prince Duan's. Over the years, the Tang family had made many efforts, but they had not made up for this gap. Now they had offended so many people at once. Tang Chi looked at the empty seat opposite and said gloomily, "This rebellious son." Tang Jing sat down below, raised his head, and said, "This matter cannot be blamed entirely on him. He should have been jointly designed by Tang Ning and Xiao Ju. After this incident, Ling Feng and the Prince of Dian probably also hate them together." When the name was mentioned, Tang Chi frowned. Although he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that the current Tang Ning was no longer the Tang Ning who had just entered Beijing. Now he was a doctor in the Ministry of War and a favorite of the Emperor. The Tang family had missed the best opportunity. This thorn that was originally only stuck in the flesh has now penetrated into the bone marrow. I heard that on the last day of the 16 guards competition, he will select 2 people in front of everyone and give them 2 gifts. Tang Jing thought for a moment and said, "If it can be done at that time." Tang Hui glanced at him and said, "You don't need to do anything." Tang Jing wanted to do something about the lottery to make Tang Ning lose his reputation in public, but he didn't expect his father to deny his idea before he even said it. He couldn't help but ask, "Why?" Tang Hui didn't look at him again, and said lightly, "Put all these thoughts away in the future. The left doctor of the Ministry of Revenue is about to retire. You should strive for this position." Tang Jing looked at him and nodded, "I know." After the dinner, Tang Jing walked into the courtyard with an unhappy look on his face. A voice came from behind him. "Can't figure out why your father doesn't let you worry about these things." Second uncle Tang Jing looked back at Tang Chi and said, "I don't understand. This is obviously a good opportunity." Tang Chi raised his hand and pressed it down, indicating that he didn't need to say anything more, and then said, "This is the difference between you and Tang Ning. When you figure out why he changed the chosen person from 1 to 2, you won't ask this question." Tang Chi walked up, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "The water in the capital is very deep. You are still young. It doesn't matter if you don't understand some things. You will understand them naturally in the future. Now you just need to do your job in the Ministry of Revenue." Watching Tang Chi leave with his hands behind his back, Tang Jing looked suspicious and murmured, "What does it mean?" "The prince's mansion of the King of Dian." The Prince of Dian walked into a room and asked, "Have you figured it out?" A scholar stood up and said, "My prince, we have figured it out. This time we have lost at least 200,000 taels. 200,000 taels. The Prince of Dian shook his body, closed his eyes, clenched his fists, and gritted his teeth and said, "Tang Ning, Xiaoju." After a long time, he opened his eyes and asked, "In the last match of the 16 guards competition, are they going to pick 2 people and give 2 big gifts?" The scholar nodded and said, "My prince, this matter is already known to everyone in the capital." The Prince of Dian said again, "It is said that most of these gifts were given by the Tang people. If I remember correctly, the person behind the Tang people is Tang Ning, right?" The scholar nodded again and said, "Yes." "Guess, will he do something about it?" The Prince of Dian narrowed his eyes and murmured, "Your Majesty will also go there at that time. If he does something in front of your Majesty, will it be considered as deceiving the Emperor?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 468. In the inner courtyard of the Tang family, Zhao Man leaned next to Tang Ning and asked, "Are you really going to give a big gift to your father?" Tang Ning let out a long sigh of relief and asked, "What else?" It has been quite a while since he came to this world, and many changes have taken place in his thinking and concepts. However, no matter how he changes, some of his subconscious minds and concepts will not change. This led him to not consider the existence of Chen Huang when he first came up with the idea of Koi, nor did he consider that the title Chosen One could not be used by everyone. He had to admit that compared with those old foxes in the capital, his sense of smell was still lacking in some aspects. Zhao Man shook his arm and said, "Father, besides liking money, he also likes face. Just make him happy. Tang Ning looked down at her and asked, is there any reward? Zhao Man hugged his neck and said with a flushed face, close your eyes first. After a long time, Tang Ning walked out of the inner courtyard and saw Xiaoju waiting outside. Xiaoju looked at him and pointed at his lips. Tang Ning wiped her mouth and asked, who won? Xiaoju said, Zhou Yue. The left feather guard won. This time, there was only one third-place match and one final left in the 16-guard competition. In yesterday's game, Zhou Xiaoyi once again pulled off a big upset. With a slight advantage, he eliminated the powerful Yu Yue and entered the finals ahead of schedule. Even as the game progressed, everyone thought that Zhou Xiaoyi was no longer what he used to be, but they still did not expect that they could even eliminate the right feather guard. As the biggest dark horse in this game, Zhou Xiaoyi had already caused a stir. Everyone pays enough attention to it. Today's match between Zhou Yue and Zhou Jinyue ended with Zhou Yue's victory, which also means that the final day will be another fateful showdown between Zhou Xiaoyi and Zhou Yue. Xiaoju thought of something, looked at Tang Ning and asked, the lottery will be held in 2 days. Are you sure you don't want to give it to me? How about half of it for each of us? Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, are you sure you dare to ask for it? Xiaoju thought for a while, shook his head and said, forget it, I don't want to compete with His Majesty. He changed his mind and said, but this is cheating. Are you sure you won't be discovered by the Yashitai? It is true that Emperor Chen was cheating by default, but this is actually something that everyone has recognized. No censor or official would be stupid enough to undermine the emperor. By increasing the number of winners by 1, he has actually told them clearly. Being a censor is a high-risk profession. If you don't understand this, you will have become a victim of court games long ago. At that time, there shouldn't be anyone so indifferent. Near the end of the year, the 16th guard competition has also come to an end. Among the left and right feather guards, the left feather guard successfully entered the finals, while the right feather guard was eliminated early. Although there is a factor of strength, luck also accounts for a large part. At this moment, somewhere on the school field inside the palace, there are more than 100 right-wing guards standing on the field, and opposite them, there are only about 10 people. As a general waved the small flag in his hand quickly, the more than 100 people immediately rushed towards the opposite side. The dozen or so people on the opposite side were unhurried. When they got closer, something was thrown out of their sleeves, and a burst of thick smoke immediately appeared above the school grounds. After the thick smoke passed, more than half of the hundreds of right-wing guards fell to the ground. The guards and generals who were watching were shocked when they saw this. The few who were lucky enough not to be poisoned also retreated and did not dare to step forward. Gong Sunying threw a paper bag to a Yu Yue general and said, this is the antidote. Just boil it into a pot and let them take it. The general took the antidote and looked at Yu Yue lying on the ground with some fear. He bowed his hand to Gong Sunying and left quickly. Chen Huang stood in the distance, watching this scene, and said, if the 16 guards competition also has such methods, even the weakest guard can easily defeat my Yulin guards. Ling Yun stood beside him, cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, although these methods are powerful, they are also very limited. They can only be used for sneak attacks. When the two armies are fighting the enemy and we are all in one place, so poison is useless. Pick 100 people from Zhou Yue and give them to her. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, although these are heresy, they are also very useful. There will always be times when they are useful. Ling Yun's lips moved and finally said, I obey the order. Chen Huang thought of something and asked again, the last match of the competition will be Zhou Yue versus Zhou Xiaoyi. Ling Yun cupped his hands and said, yes. Chen Huang asked, how sure are you Zhou Yue that you can win against them? Ling Yun thought for a while and said, Master Tang's military training skills are extraordinary. Zhou Xiaoyi is no longer what he used to be. I will do my best. The meaning of this sentence is that Zhou Yue is not confident that he can definitely beat Zhou Xiaoyi. Obviously a month ago, the strength of the two teams was still very different. Chen Huang showed a strange look on his face. He shook his head and said, "It seems that I have to give it to this Zhonglang general." The poisoned Yu Yue was helped down one by one. Chen Huang looked at the person behind him and asked, "What do you think of this poisonous poison technique?" A middle-aged man standing behind him and standing side by side with Wei Jian raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, the rumored poisonous poison technique is indeed extraordinary." Chen Huang looked forward and said, "I don't know when she will be able to train an army for me that is proficient in the art of poisonous poison." The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "Your Majesty, no matter how powerful the art of poison is, it is just an evil way, which cannot compare to the great way of governing the country and bringing peace to the world. If you are proficient in poison, you can be invincible, and the Liang kingdom would not have perished back then. The Liang kingdom perished from within, not from without." Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, "I know it in my heart, you don't need to say more." Emperor Chen flicked his sleeves and left, and the middle-aged man stood there, silent. Wei Jian looked at him and smiled, "Your Majesty has always been sensible in doing things, why should Lord Han worry?" The middle-aged man looked forward and said lightly, "The most difficult thing in the world is the first step. Once the first step is taken, the subsequent steps will become easier and easier. At that time, it will be difficult to turn back." He looked at Wei Jian and said, "No one understands this truth better than me." Wei Jian shook his head and said, "You should also understand, Your Majesty, that's the truth. The penultimate match of the 16 guards competition has just ended. The right feather guard is still slightly stronger and defeated the left golden feather guard to win the third place in this competition. The ranking of the 13 guards who did not enter the top 3 is not important, and there is no need to compete separately. They can be ranked according to points and winning rate. Tomorrow is the last match of the competition. When they beat the right feather guard, they still have some points reserved. It should not be difficult to beat the left feather guard." Tang Ning seems to have seen the championship position waving to them. Tang Ning walked around the cavalry camp and found that everyone was in high spirits. No one had expected Zhou Xiaoyi to make it this far before the game, which directly changed everyone's impression of them. Even those who did not play were proud of it. Only General Chen Zhonglang was a little unhappy, and he didn't seem to be happy for Zhou Xiaoyi at all. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 469. Chapter 467 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man, offering treasures and asking for help. The finals of the first Tangren Cup 16 Guards Championship, exclusively sponsored by Tangren, will be held in 2 days. Even though many people still don't know what exclusive title and championship means, it doesn't affect them from knowing that the grand scene of this competition is rare. The purpose of the 16th Guards competition was not only to compete, but also to show the strength of Chen State to Chu State and other countries in the western regions, and to deter foreign countries. This is a rare event. In addition to officials from the DPRK and China, dignitaries in the capital, there are also envoys from other countries, and even His Majesty will attend in person. After the competition is over, the organizer of the competition will select 2 people under the spotlight and give them a gift worth 10,000 taels of silver. The merchants will pursue profits. This is the first time they have seen such a generous merchant. There are still 2 days left before the competition, and everyone in the Zioki camp is already extremely busy. 2 days later, in addition to the officials from the DPRK and the central government, there were also His Majesty and foreign envoys who appeared here. They must arrange everything perfectly and not make His Majesty dissatisfied or make a fool of themselves in front of outsiders. The hygiene of the Zioki camp must be thoroughly cleaned, and the security work in the next 2 days is also very important. Enough personnel must be arranged at the entrance of the Zioki camp to check tickets, and enter with tickets. Special passages must be opened for Chen Huang and some distinguished people. Tang Ning had worked in the Ministry of Rites and studied the etiquette system of Chen State, so she was very familiar with this kind of face-saving project. In this competition, all the tickets were sold. The prices of the few tickets that were rarely circulated on the black market in Beijing have also increased several times, and countless people have been coveting them. In previous years, the 16 guards competition has never attracted so much attention, but this year was different. Tang Ning spent a lot of effort and money on publicity. The 16 guards competition has become a national sport. After suffering many losses, everyone began to realize that they had always underestimated Zhou Xiaoyi's strength. They defeated all their opponents along the way, and many of them were strong opponents who could compete for first place in the competition. It was definitely not luck. As a result, Zhou Xiaoyi's strength is recognized, which makes the odds of the last game not so outrageous. Of course, overall, more than half of the people believe that Zhou Xiaoyi's myth will end at the hands of Zhou Yue. Tang Ning walked around the venue for the last time and saw General Chen Zhonglang sitting on a certain step, looking a little lost. He walked over and asked, "General Chen, what's wrong?" General Chen Zhonglang raised his head, bowed his hands to him in embarrassment, and said, "In a few days, Mr. Tang will be called General Tang. From now on, Chen will have to rely on General Tang more." "What are you talking about, General Chen?" Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "I heard that General Chen Yuyue will be transferred to the north soon. Your Majesty intends to transfer General Chen to temporarily serve as General Yuyue Zhonglang." General Chen Zhonglang was stunned, then stood up immediately and asked, "Is this the case?" "The news from the palace should not be false." Tang Ning bowed her hands to him and said, "Congratulations in advance to General Chen." Chen Zhonglang stood up, cupped his hands and said, "Same joy, same joy." Among the 16 guards, it is extremely difficult for senior generals to be promoted. Generally, as long as they are transferred to the front battlefield, as long as they have accumulated enough military exploits, they can be promoted to another level when they return. Yuyue Zhonglang will be transferred this time and come back. I am afraid that he will be appointed as a general in a certain guard. He will be transferred to the temporary post. Although it is a flat transfer, how can the Zioki guards be compared with the Habayashi guards? After more than 10 years in that position, maybe he can make further progress. Possible. Chen Zhonglang swept away the gloom in his heart, raised his hand to Tang Ning, and said, "I'm going to see those guys. I can only win, not lose, in the final competition." 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. When the emperor is present, safety is always the first consideration. On the day of the finals, except for a few people, most of the audience needs to enter the venue half an hour in advance. The emperor's position is naturally unique. It is located in the center of the stand and has the clearest view. It is isolated from the stands on both sides. The space on the rostrum is not small. Emperor Chen is sitting in the front, flanked by King Kong and King Duan. After that came King Huai and King Run. Some important ministers and envoys from other countries were further back. As for the rest, they were only on the outside. There is only one game today, and it won't last very long. Before the competition begins, there are several singing and dancing programs. Among them, half of the programs were brought by those small countries in the western region. This was the practice in previous years. The western regions and the grasslands have different meanings to the Chen state. Although the Sushan people also have many tribes, all tribes are one nation. However, the western regions are different. They are all independent countries. There are fights and frictions among the small countries. Continuously, it was impossible to unite to invade Chen state, and they were not regarded as enemies by Chen state. The dances in the western regions were more open and enthusiastic than those in the central plains, with navels and thighs exposed. Tang Ning raised her eyes and found that many courtiers could not help but swallow their saliva. Women from the western regions are treated differently from women from the Chen kingdom. If the women from the Chen kingdom were on the court at this moment, they would probably jump out immediately and scold them for being immoral. After the dance, several beauties from the western regions knelt down and faced Emperor Chen. Holding something in their hands, an envoy from the western region stepped forward and mumbled a few words. Chen Huang looked down and asked, "What did he say?" An official from the Honglu temple stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this is an envoy from the Wuzi kingdom. He said that this is a piece of peerless jade they found in the western regions, and they would like to take this opportunity to present it to your Majesty." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "Present it?" Someone immediately stepped forward and presented it to Emperor Chen. The jade was emerald green and translucent, and it was still a piece of unpolished jade without being carved. When Prince Duan saw this, he immediately bowed and said, "Father, this jade is translucent, pure in color, and has no flaws. It is indeed the best jade. I congratulate you for getting this treasure." King Kong just opened his mouth, but Prince Duan beat him to the punch. He could not say more, so he could only close his mouth with an unhappy look. Emperor Chen was obviously very satisfied with the gift. He looked down and said, "It's rare that you are so thoughtful. I accept this gift." Without pausing, he continued, "Since you have given me such a generous gift, I cannot be stingy. I will give you 100 kilograms of tea, 1,000 pieces of top-quality silk, and 100 pieces of official kill porcelain." The official of the Honglu temple translated Emperor Chen's words to several people, but the western region envoy did not stand up, but bowed again and said a few words in a hurried tone. Emperor Chen looked at the official of the Honglu temple again. The official of the Honglu temple looked at the western region envoy and turned back to say, "Your Majesty, the envoy of Wuzi said that they do not want rewards, but only ask your Majesty to send troops to help them and fight against Xiaowan." While the Wuzi envoy was talking, the official of the Honglu temple explained, and everyone heard it clearly. Xiaowan is also a country in the western regions. It is now stronger than Wuzi. Over the past 10 years, it has annexed several small countries in the western regions. Wuzi is their next target. The Wuzi envoy's inexplicable treasure offering this time is actually an attempt to call for reinforcements. However, this is obviously inconsistent with Chen's attitude towards the western regions. The two countries have always been non-aggression, and Chen has no precedent of interfering in the affairs of small countries in the western regions. Moreover, the envoy of Xiaowan is sitting among the envoys of the western regions, and Xiaowan and Chen have never had any friction. Chen has no reason to offend a powerful country in the western regions because of a piece of jade. Emperor Chen did not think for long, then looked at them and said, "This is a family affair in the western regions. It is not easy for my Chen to intervene. Today is the 16 guards competition. These things will be discussed later." Emperor Chen has already expressed his position, and the envoy of Wuzi naturally has no way to do anything, and can only retreat helplessly. Tang Ning glanced at the envoys. Fighting a war requires both people and money. How could the court do something that has no benefits? Unless Xiaowan is going to unify the western regions and pose a huge threat to the state of Chen, she cannot bribe the emperor with just a piece of jade. After the Wuzi envoy withdrew, Dr. Wu stepped forward and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, the time for the competition has come. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 470. Chapter 468 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man, revealing the shady story. The last game of the 16 guards competition is Zhou Yuwei's revenge battle, and it is also a battle that determines whether Zhou Xiaoyi can continue his undefeated legacy. This competition is very important to Zhou Yue and Zhou Xiaoyi, as well as to many people in Beijing, because the result of the competition is closely related to the money in their pockets. Before the competition, Tang Ning had specifically reminded Xiao Ju to let Zhou Xiaoyi win, but not to win so obviously, as if he had to use all his strength to barely win. If even Zhou Xiaoyi, who was originally ranked at the bottom among the 16 guards, could defeat the emperor's own army, it would not be a shame for the emperor, and it would also attract the attention of interested people. The competition has begun, and everyone's attention is on the field. The Zhou Yue is now using a cone formation, with their elite forces in front, attacking the enemy in a narrow front, breaking through and splitting the enemy's formation, and expanding the results on both wings. It seems that the Zhou Yue will attack and break through from the beginning. Zhou Xiaoyi uses a wild goose formation, but it seems to be different. It contains some changes. The elites of Zhou Xiaoyi are contained. Zhou Xiaoyi has an attack while defending, and a defense while attacking. This formation is something I've never seen before, and it doesn't look easy to deal with. After a year, Zhou Xiaoyi's progress has been so great. Even the elite of the frontier army can only do this. Next to Emperor Chen, there were special generals from the 16th Guards who explained it. Most of the civil servants present, including Emperor Chen, did not understand these things. They came here today just to watch the fun. Fortunately, the general explained it in detail, but he didn't understand it. Even if you understand the military formation, you can barely understand it. The generals watched the competition on the field with great interest, with strange expressions frequently appearing on their faces. The battle situation on the field was tense, and the winner could not be determined for a moment. Chen Huang withdrew his gaze and asked, "Who has the upper hand now?" Lu Ding stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, the difference in strength between the two parties is not obvious. Judging from the situation in front of us, Zhou Xiaoyi has the upper hand." Chen Huang looked at Tang Ning. He didn't know what he was thinking of, but the expression on his face was a little hesitant. Being able to allow Zhou Xiaoyi, who is ranked at the bottom of the 16th Guards, to compete with the elite of the Forbidden Army within a month, doesn't it mean that as long as he is given time, he can take the combat power of the 100,000 Forbidden Army to a higher level? It stands to reason that those who can do this are generals who have not been seen in decades, and they should use their abilities on the battlefield. But the problem is that Tang Ning is also the talent he likes. He can also play a huge role in the court. Both of his talents should not be wasted. Only when the time comes is the best way to employ people. He thought for a moment, and the voice of the commentating general became slightly urgent. Zhou Yue's formation was defeated, Zhou Xiaoyi began to counterattack, they are increasing their advantage, Zhou Yue may lose already. Chen Huang looked at the dojo and found that Zhou Xiaoyi, who was originally mainly defensive, had changed his formation at some point, suppressing Zhou Yue and approaching their commander's flag step by step. From the surrounding auditoriums, cheers came one after another. The cheers grew louder and louder, and finally reached their peak at the moment Zhou Xiaoyi took the flag of Zhou Yue. This also means that the 16-guard competition ended with Zhou Xiaoyi winning the first place. It was Zhou Xiaoyi who won. What do the emperor's soldiers do for food? Haha, I made the right bet, I made the right bet. Haven't you noticed that they have had a hard time winning every game from the beginning, but they can win every game? Zhou Xiaoyi is mighty. There were noisy voices in the surrounding stands, and everyone was talking about it. It was not until the cavalry guard responsible for maintaining order stepped forward to stop it that it gradually became quiet. Zhou Xiaoyi's victory is beyond my expectation. Chen Huang stood up with a satisfied expression on his face and said, "It is quite rare for Zhou Xiaoyi to win the championship of the 16th Guards." Zhou Xiaoyi won the championship. Captain Xiao Ju made outstanding achievements in leading the team and was promoted to Yaolang General. Chen Qi, the Zhou Xiao Ei Zhonglang General, was transferred to Yuyuwei Zhonglang General. He glanced at Tang Ning, but didn't say anything. The appointment of Xiao Zhu and Chen Qi was a normal transfer. Tang Ning was suddenly appointed as Zhou Xiao Ei's lieutenant general. I'm afraid many officials would object, so it would be better to go back to the palace and make another plan. Purpose. General Chen Zhonglang and Xiao Zhu immediately stood up and raised their hands. Thank you, Your Majesty. Huang Chen looked at Tang Ning and asked, I heard that after the competition, you will give out 2 big gifts. Regardless of whether Emperor Chen wanted this gift or not, they had to give it to him. Tang Ning secretly thought in her mind, stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the note with the seat number on it has been put into the box, and the seat number was drawn. That person is the winner. To show fairness, I would like to ask a few adults to verify it first. He looked back at the officials on the field and asked, which adults are willing? Lu Ding thought for a moment, stepped forward and said, I'll go first. He walked to the lottery box, looked around the box, and put his hand in. After a while, he took it back, looked at Chen Huang, and said, I have already checked it, there is nothing abnormal. Tang Ning looked over again and asked, is there any other adults who are still willing to test it? Figures of people came out of the crowd one after another, and Yu Shitai inspected it carefully, all indicating that there was nothing wrong with the lottery box. Tang Ning nodded and said, if that's the case, then. Wait a minute. Tang Ning looked forward and saw the Prince of Dian getting up and leaving the table, walking towards this side. The Prince of Dian walked up to him, smiled at him, and said, I'll take a look too. Tang Ning looked at him for a moment, smiled slightly, and said, please, Prince. The Prince of Dian walked to the lottery box, looked around the box, and then turned his back to everyone and reached into the box. He has always been good at finding details. Several officials have checked the box before, and they all said that there was nothing wrong with the box, but the faces of several people changed at a certain moment, and his intuition told him that there must be something fishy. He stretched out his hand and felt around the wall of the box, but did not find anything unusual. He stretched out his hand slightly and touched the upper wall of the box. An inexplicable smile appeared on his face, and he took down a piece of paper pasted on the upper wall of the box. Including the 3 ministers and the chief censor, no one in front of him thought that they would post this piece of paper on the upper wall of the box. He looked down and saw a number 1 written on the paper. It was a very obvious conspiracy. The person with the number 1 was the one they had chosen in advance. When the time came, they could just take it off to hide it from everyone. Although the gifts were sent by them, the 16 guards competition was hosted by the Ministry of War. To tamper with it in front of His Majesty and the civil and military officials in the court was to deceive the emperor. Because the Prince of Dian had his back to everyone, no one saw his actions clearly. He held the note in his palm, a smile appeared on his face, and the moment he turned around, a light suddenly flashed in his mind. His seat number was 28, and the seat numbers got smaller as they went forward. Doesn't that mean that the person with the seat number 1 was the one sitting in the front? The Prince of Dian raised his head and looked to the front, just in time to meet the eyes of Emperor Chen. The Prince of Dian trembled and stood there in a daze. His legs began to weaken a little, and he felt a little dizzy. It seemed that there was a thick and indissoluble darkness sweeping in front of him. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 471. Chapter 469 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man, Blackmail. When it was discovered that the seat number he took out represented His Majesty, the Crown Prince of Dian understood what all this was about. He also understood why no one in front of him noticed such an obvious thing. There is a shady secret in this lottery, but this shady secret is too big, a shady secret bigger than the sky, which cannot be revealed by just a prince. Tang Ning looked at the Dian prince. He didn't expect that there would be such a stunned person in the world. He was the closest to the Prince of Dian just now, so he could clearly see the movements in his hands. However, if he failed to hit Chen Huang, not only the Prince of Dian would be unlucky, but maybe even his middle lieutenant would be ruined. He turned to look at Xiaoju, glanced at the Dian prince with a hidden look, and secretly made a gesture to Xiaoju. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Prince Dian's mind went blank. Standing there, he felt waves of dizziness, and the sounds in his ears seemed to come from somewhere. Xiaoju grabbed his shoulder, shook it vigorously, and said, "Your Majesty, I ask you, is there anything wrong with this prize box?" The Crown Prince of Dian came to his senses and said in a dry and hoarse voice, "No, no." Emperor Chen withdrew his eyes from the Prince of Dian and said, "Since there is no problem, let's get started." "Your Majesty, are you feeling unwell? I'll help you sit down." Xiaoju supported the Crown Prince of Dian and sat down in his place. He patted his hand vaguely and whispered in his ear, 100,000 taels, it's up to you to draw the prize this time. The Prince of Dian's body trembled, his eyes finally regained their clarity, and he suddenly raised his head to look at Xiaoju. Xiaoju looked at him, lowered his voice and said, "You don't have much time." "Good." The Crown Prince of Dian's eyes welled up with hope, and he couldn't wait to speak. 100,000 taels is not a small amount to him, but if something goes wrong today, it will be irreversible no matter how many 100,000 taels he spends, so there is no need for any hesitation. Xiaoju sat back down and winked at Tang Ning. Tang Ning stepped forward and said, "For the sake of fairness, next, I will choose one person from everyone here to draw the first chosen person." His eyes swept through the crowd, and finally landed on the Crown Prince of Dian, and said with a smile, "As the first candidate, why not let the Crown Prince do the drawing?" As if he was worried that others would compete with him, Prince Dian quickly stepped forward and said, "In that case, I'll start." The moment he quickly reached into the box, his whole body relaxed and he breathed a long sigh of relief. His hand stirred in the box for a moment, then he slowly took it out, opened his palm, and there was a piece of paper in the palm of his hand. No one. He looked at the note in his hand, looked left and right, and asked doubtfully, "Who is no one?" When he looked forward, the Crown Prince of Dian had a look of shock on his face. He walked forward quickly, knelt down on the ground, and said loudly, "Congratulations to your Majesty, congratulations to your Majesty. Your Majesty is blessed with profound blessings. You are truly a god, the person chosen." Tang Ning observed everyone's expressions and found that not many people were surprised. It seemed that they had expected such an ending. While there were still expressions of surprise on the faces of King Duan and King Kong, King Huai had already stood up, bowed to Emperor Chen and said, "My dear father, I congratulate you." At this time, many people had stood up and stepped forward. "Congratulations to your Majesty. Your Majesty is the Emperor, and it seems that even God favors your Majesty. This is natural. Your Majesty is the real chosen one." Tang Ning glanced at them. They were a bunch of sycophants, with poor acting skills and exaggerated expressions. Emperor Chen was actually quite happy with this. The king of a country, a high-ranking member of the second or third rank of the imperial court, had such an expression that he would give up. Emperor Chen looked at the Crown Prince of Dian, who was kneeling on the ground with an unpredictable expression in his eyes. He looked at Tang Ning and said, "Of all the people, they chose me. It's a coincidence." Tang Ning looked at him and said sternly, "There is God's will in the dark. Your Majesty is the man of destiny, so he will naturally be favored by God. I will let someone send this gift to the palace." When meeting such an emperor who cares about face, it is inevitable that wherever he wears small shoes in the future, it is better to do as the Romans do. After everyone congratulated them, they all returned to their seats. Lu Feng, the doctor of the Ministry of Rites, stepped forward, looked at Tang Ning and asked, Your Majesty is destined to be the one chosen by fate. I wonder who the next chosen person with such luck will be. As soon as Lu Feng said this, everyone who had just sat down raised their heads. This sentence is very heartbreaking. In Chen State, the only person who can be described as the chosen one is His Majesty. No matter who is chosen, it seems that he has violated the taboo. This was an oversight by the Ministry of War. If it was not handled properly, His Majesty would be dissatisfied. Lu Feng's words were equivalent to putting Tang Ning on the fire. Tang Ning glanced at Lu Feng and smiled. How about you give it a try, Mr. Lu? Lu Feng took a step back and said hurriedly, how can I be so virtuous and capable? How dare I act on behalf of heaven? Tang Ning smiled slightly, turned to face Emperor Chen, and bowed. Your Majesty is the emperor of a country, and he is appointed by God. Your Majesty's wishes are God's will. I boldly ask Your Majesty to condescend to select the second person today. The officials and dignitaries present were startled when they heard this, and then looked at Tang Ning in surprise. He played the skill very beautifully, completely resolving the dilemma Lu Feng had brought to him. The person chosen by heaven is the person chosen by the emperor, and no one can find any problems. It is said that Mr. Tang is talented and intelligent, but today I found out that the rumors are true. No wonder His Majesty thinks so highly of him. OK, Chen Huang did not refuse. He stood up again and said, then I will join in the fun. He walked to the prize box, pulled out a card at random, and read, 2356. The number on the note is the seat number. The larger the number, the further away the seat is, and the cheaper the ticket is. Even ordinary people can afford the tickets in this area. After Chen Huang finished speaking, a guard walked out quickly, and soon brought someone over. The person who came was wearing ordinary clothes and had an ordinary appearance. He was the kind of person who would not be found in a crowd. When Bei brought him here, he was still in a daze. After he came to his senses, he immediately knelt down on the ground and said in a trembling voice, Grass, the common people are bowing to Your Majesty. For a commoner who has been promoted to the capital, he may never have the opportunity to see the emperor in his life, let alone the civil and military officials of the dynasty, and the dignitaries of the capital. After seeing the ceremony, he was so trembling that he could not utter a complete sentence. At this time, the news of the winner had gradually spread, and the quiet arena became noisy again. 2356, I am 2355, it was almost me. That's Lao Wang from Dongxiang. I don't know what kind of luck he got. This is a gift of 10,000 taels of silver. Even this mud-legged guy can hit it? Where is the law of heaven? Where is the law of heaven? By the way, isn't there another one? There is still a chance. Didn't you hear just now that another one was also selected? Who is it? Your Majesty. What, this, isn't this? SHH, keep your voice down, I don't want my head anymore. After the competition and the lottery were over, Emperor Chen drove back to the palace, and everyone left one after another. Xiaoju looked at the pale and frightened Crown Prince of Dian, and reminded him, Prince, please don't forget. Tang Ning glanced at the Prince of Dian and asked casually, don't forget what? Xiaoju said, 100,000 taels of silver. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, what 100,000 taels of silver? Xiaoju stared at him and said in surprise, didn't you ask me to ask him for 100,000 taels? Tang Ning was even more surprised and asked, when did I say that? Xiaoju said, then you raised one finger and made a fist. Isn't it the number you taught me? Tang Ning looked at him and explained, what I mean is that note number 1 is in his hand. So that's it? Xiaoju suddenly realized, then looked at him and asked, do you still want these 100,000 taels? Want?